He stood alone outside the imposing courthouse, dressed only in the clothes on his back, clutching a tattered manila envelope overflowing with legal documents, a somber testament to the ultimate loss of everything he once possessed. His wife emerged triumphantly from the courtroom, taking with her their luxurious $3.4 million mansion, half of his former net worth, and a smug, victorious smirk. As she passed through the heavy glass doors, she leaned in, and for a fleeting moment, he hoped for a kind word or a shared memory. Instead, she looked him dead in the eye and whispered with contempt, "You're pathetic." Her words stung more than any argument made by the lawyers in court. She left with Hank, his best friend of 2 decades, who didn't even spare him a glance. That evening, he found a secluded spot behind a diner on Route 9, curled up in the seat of his truck, and desperately tried to comprehend where he had gone so wrong. At midnight, his phone broke the silence. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but a premonition urged him to. A calm voice said, "Mr. Elridge, we have been trying to reach you for 15 years. This is Gallon Private Banking Group from Zurich. We believe you are the rightful heir to an account belonging to Roy Elridge." He froze, as if struck by lightning. His Uncle Roy had vanished almost 20 years ago. The voice stated an account number, then paused dramatically. "Mr. Elridge, the balance in this account is $47 million. As his heart pounded, the voice added, "You will need to understand some details about the origin of these funds." He was Thomas Elridge, 51, and until recently, he believed he had a solid, happy life. He wasn't fabulously wealthy, but he had worked tirelessly to build something meaningful. For 30 years, he had dedicated himself to construction, personally laying foundations and earning every dollar through sweat and grit. He held steadfast beliefs in loyalty, family values, getting up early, and going to bed feeling accomplished. He truly thought this was enough for a happy life. He and Kelly met in their youth. He was 21 when they married. She had a fire in her eyes and a presence that lit up any room. He fell instantly and completely in love. In the beginning, they had little, a modest 1-bedroom apartment in suburban Poughkeepsie, second-hand furniture, and big hopes. He took any job to provide for them, roofing, framing, repairs. Kelly worked at a diner by day and diligently studied to become a nurse in the evenings. In those years, they were a real team. They celebrated their first tax return as if they had won the lottery. They improved their credit, bought a dilapidated house, and poured all their energy and savings into renovating it. He worked himself to exhaustion, and she would bring him lemonade and sandwiches, and they would sit on the porch, dreaming of the future. He loved her with all his heart. In time, he assembled his own construction crew. Word of his reputation spread quickly. He began to secure larger jobs and higher pay. One day, he won a city contract that changed everything for them. They stopped living paycheck to paycheck and started building capital. That's when he decided to surprise Kelly with a luxurious mansion. It wasn't some ostentatious glass and concrete structure, but a classic, ivy-clad brick estate surrounded by tall trees like a fortress. Located in affluent Westchester County, it offered peace, quiet, 5 bedrooms, a wine cellar they never used, and a garden Kelly planned to fill with lavender but never did. The estate cost $3.4 million, most of which he paid in cash, with the rest financed. He thought he was giving her a dream, but she simply called it a real house, and after that, something subtly shifted in their relationship. Kelly began to change. She joined an exclusive country club, then some charity board. Her hair was always impeccable, and she started talking more about wine tastings and social galas than family dinners at home. He attributed it to a natural process of growing up. People change, and he decided he just needed to adapt to her new status. Time relentlessly marched on, demanding only that he keep pace. Yet, he strived to maintain an island of simplicity and constancy in his life. Weekends were for his daughter, Brandy, a 23-year-old who inherited his stubbornness and her mother's wit. Together, they indulged in simple pleasures, watching movies, walking the dogs, and when the weather permitted, fishing from the pier. His mother, Eileen, still lived in the old house near Kingston where he grew up. Every Sunday, after church, he would bring her to the mansion for dinner, even though Kelly didn't always share his enthusiasm for it. There was another person in his life, Hank, who was more than just an acquaintance. They had been through thick and thin together, building decks, hunting deer in the local woods, helping each other move, and sitting under starry skies, sharing unhurried conversations over a beer. When his father passed away, it was Hank who supported his mother at the funeral when he himself couldn't find the words. He trusted Hank more than a brother and would have laid down his life for him. He didn't notice the gathering storm, perhaps because he didn't want to see it. Kelly and Hank started spending more time together, attending charity events and late-night meetings. She explained it by saying he was too tired from work. He didn't object, believing that if he worked even harder, she would understand how much he loved her. But the chasm between them grew daily. They stopped sharing intimacies, and Kelly increasingly chose to sleep in the guest room. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how they could have drifted so far apart from those days when they sat on the porch, sharing a simple sandwich. Uncle Roy's words, spoken when he was 17, resurfaced in his memory. Uncle Roy was an eccentric character, driving a Bentley and wearing cufflinks even on Thanksgiving. One day he looked him in the eye and said, "Tommy, never think a roof over your head guarantees security. Sometimes it just keeps the truth from falling on you." He hadn't thought much of those words then, but now they held new meaning. The collapse of their relationship didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, agonizing erosion. The trust between them thinned, like a stone worn down by a river. He still hoped Kelly would come to her senses, that they could find a way to fix things. But she seemed to have left him long ago, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. All that remained between them were formalities. And even then, he couldn't have imagined she would go so far. He didn't see the approaching storm until it hit him with full force. It was a Thursday, a day he remembered vividly because he always tried to come home early. That day, he was working on a big project in Syracuse, building an extension to a deck with custom cedar planks. Finishing ahead of schedule, he headed straight home, his boots caked with dried mud, his back aching. He dreamed of surprising Kelly with her favorite cannolis from that Italian bakery in White Plains she loved so much. He held a naive hope that they could sit outside together, talk intimately like in the old days, and perhaps rekindle a spark worth holding on to. As he pulled up to the house, he noticed Hank's truck parked near the garage. This wasn't unusual. Hank often stopped by to help with small repairs or drop off game after a hunt. But something felt off. A sinister silence hung over the house. The air seemed still. He entered through the back door, walked past the kitchen, and heard a sound, a low laugh drifting from upstairs. It was her laugh, the one she made when he tickled her knees, the one that crinkled the corners of her eyes. But this time, it wasn't meant for him. He didn't rush headlong up the stairs, didn't scream or make a scene. He didn't want to believe what his gut was already screaming. He ascended slowly, each step a struggle. Reaching the bedroom door, he heard Hank's voice, then her laugh again. He threw open the door. They were there, his wife and his best friend. No shame, no panic, just that heavy silence that falls when two people realize they've been caught but no longer care. Hank was hastily pulling on his shirt while Kelly remained still. She just sat on the edge of the bed, looking at him with no hint of remorse. She crossed her legs, adjusted her hair, and in the calmest voice he had ever heard said, "You're early." On that fateful day, she uttered just one word, which sounded like a judgment. "It's too late." Hank tried to object, but his words were hollow and unconvincing. The protagonist paid them no mind. He turned sharply and left the room, giving no vent to anger or despair. Descending to the garage, he sank onto a pile of plywood and stared at the floor. In that moment, everything that had been ominously brewing for years suddenly came into sharp focus. The sleepless nights, the strained smiles, her estrangement from their daughter, his mother, and from him. That night he took refuge in the guest room. The box of cannolis remained untouched on the kitchen table. In the morning, the dessert went into the trash, and Kelly filed for divorce. There were no heated arguments, no humiliated pleas, no false promises. She had made her final decision and sought what she considered her rightful share, half of their marital assets, and perhaps more. He tried to remain civil and offered an amicable settlement. In response, she merely laughed contemptuously and declared, "You're just a builder, not a legal genius. Let the court decide." Kelly retained one of the state's highest-paid divorce attorneys, a cold and calculating professional named Donovan. Impeccable suit, dazzling smile, and the gaze of a predator. In court, he mercilessly shredded the protagonist's reputation, portraying him as emotionally unstable and prone to fits of rage. The truth was distorted beyond recognition, and the real picture of their life together was completely twisted. He was presented as a despotic workaholic who neglected his wife. Text messages were taken out of context, and two former subcontractors with whom he'd had payment disputes years ago testified against him. The lawyer even demanded financial records from a difficult recession year to create the impression that he was hiding assets. The protagonist sat in an uncomfortable suit, feeling his life crumble before complete strangers. Kelly shed no tears. She wore an elegant black dress, her hair neatly styled, her legs crossed. She looked as though she were at a fashion show, not a courtroom. When Brandy tried to defend her father, to tell the truth about how her mother had changed, Kelly didn't even grant her a glance. After 9 long months of exhausting hearings and bitter legal battles, the judge delivered his verdict. The luxurious mansion became Kelly's property. Most of their savings, his retirement account, everything was divided. He was left with only his tools, his old truck, and a modest apartment he rented just to have a roof over his head. The outcome wasn't a surprise. What struck the protagonist was how utterly hollow he felt. Not anger, not sadness, but an all-consuming numbness, as if he were watching someone else's story unfold, merely an outside observer. After the court session, he stood alone near the building. Hank was nowhere to be seen. He imagined him already at the mansion, helping Kelly celebrate her victory, pouring champagne into the crystal glasses he had once unpacked on their moving day. Kelly walked past him, accompanied by her lawyer. She cast a fleeting glance his way, devoid of any emotion or hesitation. Then she leaned in and whispered, "You're pathetic," before turning away and leaving. He didn't pursue her, nor did he utter a word. He walked to the parking lot, got into his truck and drove away, his hands trembling. He had lost his wife, his best friend, his home, and the future he had spent 30 years building. But that night, everything was about to change. He could no longer bear the white walls and stale air of the rented apartment. Instead, he decided to head north. He had no clear plan, just an overwhelming urge to leave the city and everything that reminded him of his loss. Around 10 that night, he pulled into the parking lot of a diner on Route 9, turned off the engine, and leaned back in his seat. His phone rang, an unknown number. He let it ring twice before answering. His first thought was that it might be from the court, or perhaps Kelly calling to humiliate him further. He was about to hang up when he heard a calm male voice with a European accent. "Is this Thomas Elridge?" He stammered, "Who's asking?" "This is Simon Keller from Gallon Private Banking Group, Zurich. We've been trying to reach you for several years. Are you Roy Elridge's nephew?" Uncle Roy's name hadn't crossed his mind in years. He was his father's older brother, an eccentric in a family of carpenters and farmers. He always wore expensive suits, smoked Cuban cigars, and looked as if he knew something others didn't. He'd appear every few years, hand him crisp $100 bills for his birthday, then vanish again. He hadn't been seen since the protagonist was in his early 20s. Rumors circulated that he had moved to Europe, amassed a vast fortune, and then disappeared without a trace. Suddenly, like a ghost from the past, the phone call broke the silence. The voice on the line introduced himself as a Swiss bank employee and spoke of a dormant account awaiting its moment. I instinctively cleared my throat to hide my agitation. Yes, Roy was my uncle. "What do you need?" I asked. "Mr. Elridge, you are the sole beneficiary of an inactive account, and we are obligated to contact you before its automatic closure. The account has been unused for 15 years. Your uncle left clear instructions. The funds can only be released upon the fulfillment of a specific legal condition." "What condition?" I inquired, sensing something unusual. "We were to wait until you were no longer bound by the ties of marriage." The words hit me like a thunderbolt. I straightened up in my seat. "How much are we talking about?" A brief pause followed, as if the banker was steeling himself. "The account holds $47,890, $421.77 as of this evening." I was speechless. My hands trembled. I stared at the dashboard, as if hoping to see confirmation of what I'd heard there. "Are you still there?" the banker asked. "Yes, barely," I replied, feeling the world around me shifting. He explained that my uncle had for a decade been transferring various investments into this account, including stocks and bonds from old banks. These assets grew in the shadows, awaiting their moment under the cloak of banking secrecy and legal protection. "Why wasn't I contacted sooner?" I asked. "Your uncle was very meticulous about this. He did not trust your spouse. Those are his words, not mine. He instructed us to wait for a change in your marital status. He said, and I quote, 'Tommy must be free before he remembers who he is.'" That phrase echoed in my memory. I remembered Roy saying something similar in my teenage years, when I considered him an eccentric old man with his secrets. One time, while fishing, he said, "Money is just a mirror, kid. It'll show you what you're made of. The trick is knowing who you are when you see your reflection." I never forgot those words, though I hadn't fully understood them until now. The banker continued, "For final identification and paperwork, your personal presence in Zurich will be required. All travel and accommodation expenses will be covered by us. The funds can be transferred at your instruction." I didn't answer immediately. I needed time to process what I'd heard. The banker understood and left me his direct number. After the call, I sat in the cab of my truck, gazing at the starry sky. My entire life had been turned upside down, but instead of joy, I felt small and lost, as if stuck between two worlds. The next morning, I called my mother and told her everything. She reacted calmly, without surprise or elation. "That man always knew more than he let on," she said. "Maybe now you can finally breathe freely." Then I called Brandy. After a pause, she said, "Dad, you deserve this, but don't let this money change you." That same day, I booked a ticket to Zurich, without hesitation. I packed a duffel bag with a pair of jeans, a few shirts, an old leather wallet, and the watch my father gave me for graduation. Everything else I left behind. I didn't tell Kelly. She didn't deserve it. I didn't want revenge or legal battles. I wanted to understand what my uncle had left me. Not just the money, but the reason. My intuition told me it wasn't just about the bank balance, but something far greater. The plane landed in Zurich on a gray Monday morning. The city looked like a picture postcard: clean streets, ancient buildings, people in crisp suits. I hadn't been abroad since my honeymoon in Mexico. And here I was, walking through a Swiss airport with a bank invitation in my pocket. In the arrivals hall, a driver met me with a black Mercedes and a sign bearing my name. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a polite nod, without unnecessary words. The car drove through the city center and ascended a hill overlooking Lake Zurich. We stopped before a stone building with tall iron gates, on which the name was engraved in gold letters, Gallon Private Banking Group. In the opulent offices of the private banking group, where the air was infused with the scent of fine leather and fresh polish, I was led down a long corridor. My destination was a secluded office, more akin to an aristocrat's library. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls, a massive globe stood in the corner, and the window offered a view of the serene lake, capable of calming even the most troubled soul. From behind a desk emerged a man in his 60s with an engaging smile. He introduced himself as Simon Keller, the same man I had spoken with on the phone. "Mr. Elridge, welcome. We have been eagerly awaiting your arrival," he said, gesturing for me to take a seat at the table. Keller poured a cup of aromatic coffee, handed me a thick folder, and began his explanation. It turned out that Uncle Roy's disappearance was no accident. He had deliberately removed himself from the American financial system. He liquidated his investments, sold his real estate, and transferred his assets into a trust, securely protected by multiple foreign jurisdictions. This intricate scheme utilized shell companies, time-tested money channels, and banking codes known only to a select few. All of it was legal, but maintained with the utmost confidentiality. Inside the folder, I discovered letters written in Uncle Roy's hand, addressed personally to me. These messages were to remain sealed until the divorce proceedings were finalized. In the first letter, Roy wrote, "Tommy, I understand my actions may seem strange and incomprehensible to you, but I've always watched you from afar, seen how hard you work and what a remarkable man you have become. I always wanted to leave you something more than just money. I wanted to give you freedom, but I couldn't do that while you were bound in marriage to that woman. Forgive me. But I never trusted her. I saw her true colors long before you did. Another letter contained a diary entry made many years ago when I was still a child. Tommy creates with his hands, he thinks with his heart. He will surpass me in everything. I couldn't hold back my emotions and paused my reading. My eyes filled with tears. For years I had lived with the thought that Uncle Roy had forgotten about them. But it turned out he had been hatching a plan all this time, meant specifically for me. Simon Keller slid a document across the table, granting me the right to a full transfer of funds to any account I designated. He detailed the assets, which included stocks, gold reserves, and a luxurious villa in the south of France, now also mine. My hands trembled as I signed. Just as many years ago, my life was once again changing dramatically. But it wasn't just about the money. What followed was far more important. The return flight became a kind of rebirth for me. The bitterness of the divorce hadn't vanished completely, but deep inside, something had shifted. My self-confidence had returned. It wasn't about the millions I'd gained, but the realization that I hadn't lost everything. I had simply shed all the excess, revealing my true self. The first thing I did after landing was call Brandy and tell her everything. She didn't ask for proof or guarantees, only, "So you're coming home?" I answered yes. But home wouldn't be an empty apartment now, and certainly not the mansion where his ex-wife and former best friend had settled. I bought a ranch near Nashville, a spacious property, a wraparound porch, and plenty of room for Brandy to visit any time. I personally handled the renovations, installing windows, laying floors, building a deck. Every nail I hammered had a purpose. A week later, Kelly found out and called. I ignored the first call, but answered the second. "Tom," she said, her voice full of a tenderness I hadn't heard in years. "I made a mistake. I never stopped loving you. I was angry and confused. We could try again." I let her speak, then replied, "You didn't love me when I had everything. You loved what I gave you. Now you want to come back because I'm worth something again. But I'm not the man you left." She wept, and I waited in silence, then said, "I forgive you, Kelly, but I will never forget your words outside the courthouse, and I will never be yours again." I hung up. Hank also tried to contact me, leaving a message. "Tom, let's talk man to man. I messed up. Everything got too complicated. I should have been honest." I deleted the message without listening to the end. I didn't need apologies or revenge. I sought peace, and I found it. Uncle's final gift wasn't a Swiss bank account or property deeds. It was the truth. He saw what I couldn't see myself. He gave me the means to rebuild, not just a home or a bank account, but a life that was mine again. And this time, I wouldn't waste it. Every moment of life is precious, and I couldn't afford to waste it. As before, most of my mornings began before sunrise. Old habits die hard. However, now I wasn't rushing off to work in oil-stained boots with a thermos of strong coffee. Instead, I sat quietly on the porch of my new home, savoring the morning stillness. The house looked modest, a simple ranch with a long gravel driveway, an ancient oak out front, and a homemade creaky swing on the veranda. I no longer needed luxurious marble floors or dazzling chandeliers. I sought honesty, tranquility, and the quiet that came without guilt or shame. Brandy visits often. She brings her guitar, sits on the edge of the porch, and strums tunes while I grill juicy steaks or just sip aromatic coffee. She shares her thoughts on life, talks about her goals and plans to open a small, cozy cafe. I offered her financial help, but she preferred to earn the money herself. That's why I'm confident in her success. There's a fire in her, but it's a steady, calm flame. I see in her the best traits of both her parents, my own resilience and her mother's drive. I only hope she learns to love more deeply than we ever did. His mother, Eileen, still lives in the house where I grew up. She adamantly refuses to move, despite my persistent offers to buy her a new home. She says she has everything she needs for a happy life right there. Now, I'm starting to understand her. You don't always need to chase change to move forward. Sometimes it's enough to stay put, but in the right place. Kelly never contacted me again. Hank no longer appeared at my doorstep. The path they chose in life is their own burden. I don't wish them ill, but I no longer feel responsible for their fates. In recent months, I've learned to appreciate simple joys and embrace peace. I got a dog, a charming shepherd mix named Boone, who faithfully follows me everywhere. I joined a local veterans group, though I never served, to volunteer and help them. I find solace in building useful things for those who need them: ramps, decks, park benches. It reminds me that work done with my own hands still holds immense value, regardless of my bank account balance. Furthermore, I made an important decision. I allocated a portion of my funds and established the Ridge Grant Charitable Foundation to help desperate single fathers going through a difficult period after divorce. I remember those sleepless nights, sleeping in my old truck, not knowing where to go and feeling utterly alone and abandoned. No man should have to experience that feeling. If I can help even one of them get back on their feet and regain their self-confidence, then perhaps all my losses and gains will not have been in vain. The main lesson I learned from all this is, a person's worth is not defined by what they lose or possess, but by their ability to recover from the heaviest losses. Money couldn't heal my emotional wounds, mend the betrayal, or erase the pain. However, it gave me a second chance, and I used that chance to become the man I was before life's circumstances broke me. So if anyone reading this feels broken, betrayed, or stripped of everything they thought defined them, I want that person to know there is still something within you that cannot be taken away. That essential part of yourself still exists. You just need to make the effort to find it. And when you do, protect it, cherish it, and build your new life around it. May that inner strength guide you home.